Good day everyone, it is Caitlin and today we are in the late 1860s doing some mending on a very cold day by a nice warm fire. So I have several things I need to mend today, and I'm actually at Fort McCavitt, which is a state historic site, and they have an 1867 event going on. It is freezing cold, and so I'm just sitting by the fire. I don't have a job. This is a military event. I'm kind of portraying a soldier's wife with my fiance, and so he has his military stuff to do, and I don't really have anything to do, so I'm babysitting a fire and keeping the room warm. And I figured, well, you know what, might as well make myself useful and get some sewing done. So we're just going to do some mending. Very first thing I'm going to pull out are these drawers that I have. They are probably at least 5 years old, so they're getting up there. The waistband has ripped a little bit vertically, and some of the gathering has come loose. So I'm just going to fix that real quick. Really not too big of a deal. I'm just going to use a whip stitch or a hem stitch, kind of catch all those gathers, put them back where they belong. And then I'm going to just whip up the hole kind of securely, kind of tightly, just to make sure that it's going to stay. And then I get to go back to the back and whip that part back in. So I don't have a lot of things that require a lot of work today. It's just going to be mostly little things that have piled up. I actually do keep a mending basket at the house, and it was getting full. So I definitely needed to get some of this stuff done. But it's just little projects I just need to find the time for, and it's hard when I'm at home to set aside the time to mend when I have events I need to sew for, and I have other things that I've used in place of the things that need to be mended, so they don't have to be mended right away. So it was just really nice to sit down and actually get this stuff done, so now I have a half full mending drawer and not a fully full mending drawer. Next on the list is this chemise. I actually have two chemises I need to mend today. This one is my waved braid chemise, so what we would call rickrack, they would call waved braid or wavy braid. Usually theirs is a little bit more, how would you put it, not as Van Dyke-like, so not as up and down, a little bit more waved would be their waved braid, but this is the closest I could find. It's closer than the modern rickrack, and it's a different texture than modern rickrack. I was able to find some vintage stuff that worked pretty well to the original stuff I have seen. So this is not rickrack, it's slightly different. And so I am using this. So I have used this to make a chemise. I actually have a whole set, a petticoat, a corset cover, chemise, and drawers that all match. And it's just the chemise that's come loose in a couple places. These two chemises I'm mending today were the very first things I ever hand stitched entirely by hand, and I had no clue what I was doing back then. And I had some very large stitches that I was using, though therefore they were not as sturdy, and they have ripped out. So I have this sleeve here that I'm mending. It's just the way braid has come loose a little bit, and I'm just going to tack that right back in, using a couple stitches per point instead of just the one stitch I used before, so it'll be a little bit more secure. Now I do have a hole under the arm that needs to be fixed. I'm just going to, instead of taking the whole thing out, actually running and filling it again, I'm just going to whip it closed on either end. It's going to hold together, and it's going to look just fine. Probably not ideal, but it's, again, going to work. And I have this lovely rip in the shoulder line. It's basically what happened with the drawers too. So I'm going to do the exact same thing, which is just whip each of those pleats down to the neckline in this case instead of the waistband. There is no rip in the actual neckband this time, so that's actually a little bit easier. Then I'm going to go to the other side and kind of whip that side down, and that's going to stay. Next chemise, this was another one that I hand stitched at the same time. I have some massive stitches on this one that I actually thought were small back in the day, but they are definitely not. I did do the running part right. Unfortunately with the felling, I was running it again, and my stitches got very large because it's hard to run a needle through all those layers, where I should have done a hem stitch or a felling stitch. I didn't know that back then, so I have some of these run and fell seams that have come loose. You see a giant hole because I did not run and fell this correctly. I was using far too big of stitches, and so the fabric kind of just raveled its way out. I'm going to do the same thing I have been doing, just do a little whip stitch or a little felling stitch, hem stitch, whatever you want to call it, on either end, just tack it up. And I actually didn't catch this on this day because it was a little bit darker, but I did have a nice long rip at the neckline I should have done on this day, but I caught it later. But I did catch it later, so it is now mended. But it's just the neckline where it sat had ripped about 2 inches from where that front placket was, and so all it needed to do was just tacked it up real quick, and it was a really simple fix. And now for the one thing that's not actually well, it is still mending, but something that's a little bit different. I have this 1850s dress. We're going to step out of the 1867 time frame I'm dressed in and mend an 1850s dress This one I managed to burn a hole in one of the times I was cooking, and I have since mended the apron that needed it, but I have not yet mended the dress. So I did manage to get my hands on some extra of the fabric, which is a little bit of a chore because this fabric is apparently out of print, and I could find it in the other colorway very easily. I could not find this colorway to save my life. I finally found one place, I think it was on the 6th page on Google, that I found one person who sold it. So I bought a yard of it, and now I had to buy more of it because my fiance took one look at that and said, ooh, I want a shirt out of that. So now I got to go track that place down again, but I'm actually hoping if he might actually prefer the other colorway. So I'm going to try looking for the other colorway first, and at least give him the option, because I think it's going to be easier to find. But I do agree with him. I love this fabric. It's one of my favorite dresses just because the fabric is so stinking awesome. It reminds me a lot of the mid-1850s French cotton sample book that I've seen on, I forget which museum it is, but there's a cotton sample book and it has similar prints in it. It makes me very happy to know that this print is appropriate because I really love this print. But for this one, I'm just going to take a little bit of square, because you see the holes, the burned holes, and I'm going to match the print up. So I'm going to take the print that's on the dress, and I'm going to match the patch, and then I'm going to make it about 1 inch bigger on either side than what it needs to be. Fold over the ends about 1/4 inch on all sides and just whip down the patch. The pattern is actually so busy, it really wouldn't matter even if the pattern wasn't matched up perfectly. In fact, one of them I kind of messed up on the pattern and it ended up not being perfectly matched. And you cannot tell when the dress is worn because the print is so busy, you really cannot see that it's off a little bit, which I'm good with that. But that's going to be how I'm going to mend the burn holes. And I actually have 2 of them to fix on this dress. So one's a little bit smaller, so I need a little bit of a smaller piece. So some people may actually not think it was actually that cold out this day. I think it was 35 degrees Fahrenheit. We texted one of our friends from Canada and it was like, get your weather out of our backyard now. And he wanted to know if it was snowing. And we're like, no, but it's rainy and wet and 35. It may as well be snowing. So as close to snow as we get out down here in Texas. And he was not all impressed. He said it wasn't that cold. So depending on where you are, that may not be cold to you, but here in Texas, that is actually very cold, and very cold because this was mid-November when this happened. It never gets that cold. We had a chance of snow. It didn't actually snow, but there was a chance of snow, and we don't get that in Central Texas, especially not in November. January, February, okay, sometimes every couple of years, but November makes me very afraid of what January and February is actually going to bring us. I also technically had some stockings to mend, but then I realized that I only brought the cotton yarn and not the wool yarn, and these are wool stockings, so that clearly was not going to work. So I had to stop my mending. Ended up just kind of laying about and being completely useless for the rest of the day. And now I only have a half full mending basket and not a fully full mending basket, which is always a plus. So this is a very productive day in my opinion. Even though there weren't very many visitors involved and it was very cold, I still got a lot done. And sometimes those are the best days, the days you kind of get to sit and nothing really takes you out of the 19th century. You're just kind of there and get to do things that would have been done, and it was actually quite peaceful and pleasant, and again, I very much enjoyed it. I don't often get those days where I get to sit down and actually do things that need to be done, but I don't have the time to get done. So that was very, very nice to actually be able to sit down and get all that accomplished. Anyway, that's about it for today. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe to the channel. We do a lot of 19th century things on this channel, mostly sewing. And about once a month, I'll do a living history demo is what I call it. So it's like this, showing you 19th century skills, whether it be cooking or various sewing skills, usually in costumes, so that you get to see the dresses that we make on the channel normally in action. Beyond that, thank you so much for joining me today on this very wet, cold, and dreary day to kind of warm yourself by the fire. Have a fantastic week, and I'll see you back here on Monday.